Imagine for a moment that everything you believed about one of the oldest traditions of Christianity was completely wrong, that the true meaning of Corpus Christi was deliberately hidden for centuries, that there exists a secret so deep, so disturbing, that the Church itself decided to bury it in the darkest pages of history. What I'm about to reveal in the next few minutes will shake your religious convictions. It will make you question not only what we celebrate on Corpus Christi, but also how and why this tradition emerged in a way no one has told you. What if I told you that behind this seemingly innocent religious celebration lies a story of blood, power, and manipulation that changed the course of Christianity forever? My name is your name, and today you'll discover the truth about Corpus Christi, a truth that will leave you speechless. But first, if you're here looking for answers, if you truly want to understand the mysteries behind religious traditions, subscribe to the channel right now and hit the bell, because what you'll hear today is just the tip of the iceberg of a series of revelations that will transform your view of the history of Christianity. And leave a comment now telling me, I'm ready for the truth. I want to know how many of you have the courage to face what's coming, ready to discover the true meaning of Corpus Christi, because there's no turning back after what you're about to hear. Corpus Christi, two Latin words that have echoed in church halls for over 750 years. Body of Christ sounds simple, right? A celebration of the Eucharist, the holiest sacrament of Christianity. But here comes the first surprise that will shake your certainties. Corpus Christi was not created by the apostles. It was not established by Jesus. There is no mention of this feast in the first 1200 years of Christianity. Where does it come from then? Why did it emerge in the 13th century? And why did the Church insist on spreading it throughout the world with almost desperate urgency? The answer will shock you, because Corpus Christi wasn't born out of pure devotion, but out of the most brutal political necessity of the medieval Church. It was born out of fear, paranoia, and a crisis of faith that threatened to destroy Christianity itself. To understand this, you need to know the historical context they never told you in catechism class. The 13th century wasn't just an age of cathedrals and saints. It was an age of heresies, of radical questioning, of movements that challenged papal authority itself. The Cathars of southern France preached that matter was evil and completely rejected transubstantiation. The Waldensians questioned the need for priests as intermediaries between God and the faithful. The Albigensians denied the authority of the Roman Church and created their own Christian communities. The Church wasn't just losing followers, it was also losing power. And when the Church loses power, it reacts violently and spectacularly. Let me ask you something that may never have occurred to you. Why did a religion that preaches love and forgiveness need to create such a grand, ostentatious, and theatrical celebration to celebrate something that was already celebrated at every Mass? The answer lies in the visions of a Belgian nun named Juliana de Montcornillon. But don't be fooled into thinking this was a simple mystical experience. What happened to Juliana was the first step in one of the most sophisticated religious propaganda operations in medieval history. Now let's dive into the true origins of Corpus Christi, and I guarantee that what you discover will completely change your perception of this tradition. It was the year 1209. Juliana de Montcornillon, a 16-year-old Augustinian nun, began to have visions, but they weren't ordinary visions. She saw the full moon with a dark spot, a crack that split the lunar disk in half. For 20 years, these visions recurred with increasing intensity. Finally, Christ appeared to her and revealed their meaning. The moon represented the Church's liturgical year, and the dark crack represented the absence of a feast in honor of the Blessed Sacrament. It sounds like a beautiful and uplifting story, right? But here's what they don't tell you. Juliana wasn't alone in this experience. She was part of a mystical movement that was spreading throughout Europe, especially among religious sisters. A movement that the Church closely observed and, let's say, discreetly guided. Eve of Saint Martin, Elizabeth of Huy, and other mystics in the region began to have similar visions almost simultaneously. Coincidence? Not at all. The medieval Church had a much more sophisticated network of communication and influence than we imagine. But what is most interesting is that these visions were not limited to Eucharistic devotion. They contained elements of direct combat against the heresies that threatened papal authority. Did the Cathars deny transubstantiation? The mystics received visions that extolled the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist. Did the Waldensians question clerical authority? The visions emphasized the need for priest-led rituals. In 1246, Juliana finally convinced the Bishop of Liège, Robert de Turot, to establish the Feast of Corpus Christi in his diocese. It was the first official celebration, but still local and experimental. The real explosion came when Jacques Pantaleon, who had personally known Juliana, became Pope Urban IV in 1261. And here we enter the territory of what I might call political genius disguised as divine inspiration. Urban IV not only established Corpus Christi as a universal feast of the Church, with the bull Transituris de Hoc Mundo in 1264, he did something much more astute. He entrusted the liturgical office of the feast to the young theologian Thomas Aquinas. And why was this so brilliant? Because Thomas Aquinas wasn't just a theologian. He was the greatest intellectual of his time, the man who reconciled Aristotelian philosophy with Christian doctrine. When Thomas Aquinas wrote the hymns, Pange Lingua, Tantum Ergo, and Panis Angelicus, he didn't just create liturgical texts. He created theological weapons. Every verse of these hymns is a direct refutation of the heresies of the time. Every poetic image is a theological hammer striking the head of heretical questioning. The language is so beautiful, so moving, that people sing it without realizing they are repeating arguments against movements that question the authority of the Church. But I'm going to tell you something that will make your hair stand on end. The first great Corpus Christi procession took place in Orvieto, exactly in the city where, a few years earlier, the Eucharistic miracle of Bolsena had occurred. A German priest, tormented by doubts about transubstantiation, was celebrating Mass in the Church of Santa Cristina in Bolsena when, supposedly, the host began to bleed during the consecration. The blood dripped onto the linen corporal, creating the famous relics preserved to this day in Orvieto Cathedral. Is it a coincidence that the Pope established the Feast of Corpus Christi in the very region where this miracle occurred? Is it a coincidence that the first major procession was organized to publicly display these relics? Do you really believe in so many coincidences? The truth is, the Church was creating a perfect narrative. Eucharistic miracle, mystical visions, papal installation, theological genius, public spectacle. All the elements combined to create a feast that was not just a celebration, but a demonstration of power. And let me ask you a question that may never have crossed your mind. Have you ever stopped to think about why Corpus Christi is the only Christian holiday that is necessarily celebrated on the street? Christmas, Easter, Pentecost, all the great Christian feasts can be celebrated in churches, but Corpus Christi requires a public procession. It requires the faithful to take to the streets, the entire city to come to a standstill, and everyone to see the monstrance carried by the priests. This is no coincidence. It's pure strategy. The Church said, "Do you question our authority? Look at how many people follow us. Do you deny transubstantiation? Look at how many kneel before the consecrated host. Do you want to create alternative churches? Look at who really controls the streets." Corpus Christi was the first major religious marketing operation in history, and it worked so well that it spread throughout Europe in less than 50 years. But wait, because the story gets even more interesting when we see how this holiday was implemented in different countries. In France, Corpus Christi was used to combat the remaining Cathars. In Germany, it was used to confront independent mystical movements. In Spain, it was used to consolidate the Christian Reconquista against the Moors. Each region adapted the festival to its specific political needs. But the core remained unchanged, a public demonstration of clerical power through the Eucharistic spectacle. And here's something that will make you think. Why would a religion that was born in simplicity, whose founder said, "Where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there am I," need to create such a grand, expensive, and spectacular celebration? Jesus instituted the Eucharist in a small, intimate cenacle with 12 disciples. The Church transformed it into a procession of thousands of people, with gilded altars, incense, flower carpets, and musical bands. The contrast is striking, but not here to judge whether this is right or wrong. I'm here to show you the historical truth that has been carefully hidden. Corpus Christi was born as a response to a crisis of authority, not as a spontaneous expression of faith. And if you like this in-depth analysis, if you want to know more about the secrets of religious traditions, please like the video and comment, "I want more truths," because I have much more to reveal. Now it's time to reveal the most shocking secret of Corpus Christi, something that will completely change everything you thought you knew about this tradition. Did you know that the church hid the true original name of this feast for centuries? Corpus Christi wasn't originally called that. The original name, used in early papal documents, was Festum Corporis et Sanguinis Domini Nostri Jesu Christi, Feast of the Body and Blood of our Lord Jesus Christ. Why did they change it? Why did they remove the word blood from the official name? The answer will leave you speechless. Because the emphasis on blood was provoking too much of a backlash. In several European cities, the first Corpus Christi processions were accompanied by pogroms against Jews accused of desecrating the consecrated hosts. The church realized it had created a monster. The exaltation of the body and blood of Christ was being interpreted by the people as a call to avenge the bloodshed at the crucifixion. And guess who this vengeance was directed against? In 1348, during a Corpus Christi procession in Paris, a mob invaded the Jewish quarter and massacred dozens of families. In 1369, in Brussels, accusations of desecrating the host led to the murder of hundreds of Jews during the feast celebrations. The church attempted to control this violence, but it was too late. Corpus Christi had become not only a festival of doctrinal affirmation, but also a catalyst for religious hatred. And here's the most disturbing secret. There are secret Vatican documents, discovered only in the 20th century, which show that some medieval popes knew exactly what was happening and knowingly allowed it to continue because it strengthened Christian unity against external enemies. Pope Clement VI even wrote in a confidential letter to the Archbishop of Cologne, "If the excesses of the common people during the solemnities of Corpus Christi serve to purify Christianity of pernicious elements, we must consider them as an instrument of divine providence." The Pope knew that the processions caused massacres and considered this to be useful to the interests of the Church. But that's not all. Modern historical research has uncovered something even more shocking. Juliana de Montcornillon herself, the nun of mystical visions, received secret funding from Christian merchants who wanted to eliminate competition from Jewish bankers. Documents from the Montcornillon monastery, preserved in the archives of Liège, show significant donations from merchant guilds at the very moment Juliana began having her visions. Coincidence? Not at all. The truth is that Corpus Christi was, from the beginning, a coordinated operation between the church and economic interests to consolidate Christian power through the violent marginalization of minority groups. And here's something that will make your hair stand on end. Did you know that to this day, in some European cities, Corpus Christi processions follow the exact same routes that crossed the ancient Jewish quarters of the 14th century? And that some altars are erected precisely on the sites of medieval massacres? This is no coincidence. It is historical memory crystallized in religious tradition. But let me tell you the most explosive secret of all. The church not only concealed this dark history of Corpus Christi, but actively falsified documents to create an alternative narrative. In 1843, when Pope Gregory XVI beatified Juliana of Montcornillon, the church's official hagiographers completely omitted any mention of the economic and political connections behind her visions. They created a completely sanitized biography, presenting her as a pure mystic, removed from worldly interests. But the original documents discovered in Belgian archives in the 20th century tell a very different story. Juliana was a politically connected woman who received regular visits from merchants, bankers, and even papal representatives years before her alleged divine revelations. The visions themselves follow a suspicious pattern. They began just as commercial competition between Christians and Jews reached its peak in the Liège region. They intensified during periods of economic crisis, and they ceased completely after the festival was officially established and its political objectives achieved. This doesn't look like the work of God. It looks like a very well-planned human endeavor. And this is what surprises me most. For more than 700 years, billions of people celebrated Corpus Christi, believing in a story deliberately fabricated to hide political and economic interests. You are celebrating a tradition born of manipulation, not divine revelation. And if that weren't enough to shake your convictions, let me tell you what happened when the church tried to export Corpus Christi to the Americas during colonization. Now I'm going to reveal something that will connect all the dots in a way you never imagined. Something that proves that Corpus Christi wasn't just a medieval manipulation, but continues to be used as a tool of control to this day. Have you ever wondered why Corpus Christi arrived in America with the Spanish conquistadors? Why was a holiday that supposedly celebrates Christ's humility used to justify the subjugation of entire civilizations? The answer lies in the secret documents of the Spanish Inquisition, discovered at the end of the 20th century in the archives of Seville. These documents reveal that Corpus Christi was deliberately used as a weapon of psychological warfare against indigenous peoples. The conquistadors didn't arrive in America with just swords and muskets. They arrived with an arsenal of carefully crafted religious symbols, designed to impress and terrify the native populations. And Corpus Christi was the most powerful weapon in their arsenal. Let's imagine the scene. People who had never seen horses, who had never heard of forged metal, who had never heard musical organs, suddenly witness a procession of hundreds of men dressed in gold, carrying a shining golden box, chanting in unison, in a demonstration of power that seemed supernatural. It wasn't evangelization. It was a theater of domination. Cortez brought a solid gold monstrance to Mexico, specifically for the Corpus Christi processions. Pizarro did the same in Peru, not because they were particularly pious men, but because they knew the psychological impact it would have on the conquered populations. And here's the most disturbing detail. The first Corpus Christi altars in the Americas were literally erected on the destroyed temples of indigenous religions. In Tenochtitlan, the first procession took place on the ruins of the Aztec Templo Mayor. In Cusco, the altars were placed exactly where the Inca sanctuaries had once stood. This was no coincidence. It was a deliberate strategy of symbolic substitution. But let me tell you something that will make you see Corpus Christi differently forever. Did you know that to this day, in many Latin American cities, processions follow routes that were originally designed to pass through places where indigenous massacres occurred? In Cusco, Peru, the procession passes through the Plaza de Armas, where Tupac Amaru was executed. In Mexico, many routes include sites where Aztec temples were destroyed. In Guatemala, the routes cross territories where Mayan populations were decimated. Each step of these processions is an unconscious celebration of the colonial conquest. And here's something that will surprise you even more. Researchers have discovered that many of the traditional elements of Latin American Corpus Christi, the flower carpets, the folk dances, the colorful altars, are not Christian adaptations of indigenous traditions, as we've always been told. They are cruel parodies created by the colonizers to ridicule native religions. The flower carpets mockingly imitate the floral offerings of Aztec temples. The dances were adapted from sacred rituals to transform them into Catholic entertainment. The colorful altars are caricatures of indigenous shrines. What you celebrate as religious syncretism is, in reality, a cultural humiliation crystallized in tradition. But manipulation didn't stop during the colonial era. It continued to evolve, adapting to changing times and new needs for control. In the 19th century, as independence movements spread throughout Latin America, the church used Corpus Christi to promote loyalty to conservative governments. The processions became demonstrations of support for the political status quo. In the Chilean 20th century, during military dictatorships, Corpus Christi was used to legitimize authoritarian regimes. Generals marched alongside priests, presenting themselves as defenders of the Christian faith against atheistic communism. And today, Corpus Christi continues to be used as a political tool. In countries like Brazil, Colombia, and Mexico, processions are sponsored by politicians seeking the votes of religious voters. Flower carpets are funded by businessmen seeking to associate their brands with Catholic tradition. Altars are erected by organizations with specific political agendas. Nothing has changed. The party that was born out of manipulation is still manipulation. And here's the question that should haunt you right now. If Corpus Christi has such a dark history, if it has been used to justify violence, colonization, and political control, why has the Church never assumed this historical responsibility? Why has it never apologized for the devastating consequences of this tradition? The answer is simple. Because it would reveal that one of Catholicism's most sacred traditions was built on lies, manipulation, and bloodshed. And that would destroy the credibility of much more than just a religious holiday. Leave a comment, now telling me, I need to know more, if you want me to reveal other dark secrets behind religious traditions. Because what I've shown you today is just the beginning of a much deeper investigation. We've reached the final moment of this devastating revelation, and I need to tell you how this story connects to the present in a way that will leave you shaken. Have you ever wondered why, even with the secularization of the modern world, Corpus Christi remains one of the most celebrated Catholic holidays? Why do secular governments continue to declare a religious procession a national holiday? Why do multinational corporations sponsor altars and flower carpets? The answer may surprise you, because Corpus Christi evolved to become the perfect tool for social control in the 21st century. Let me explain how this works. At a time when people are increasingly skeptical of traditional institutions, when the Church's authority is challenged by constant scandals, Corpus Christi offers something no other Catholic tradition offers: collective participation without intellectual questioning. During a Corpus Christi procession, you don't need to understand complex theology. You don't need to study doctrine. You don't even need to believe deeply. You just need to walk with the crowd, kneel when everyone else kneels, applaud when everyone else applauds. It's religion transformed into a mass spectacle. It's faith reduced to herd behavior. And here's the perverse part. Marketing companies have discovered that Corpus Christi is the most effective religious event for associating commercial brands with traditional values. Banks sponsor altars to appear ethical. Politicians carry palanquins to appear humble. Multinational corporations fund flower carpets to appear connected to their cultural roots. Corpus Christi has become a major social image washing operation. But let me tell you something I discovered while researching this video that really bothered me. There are companies that specialize in organizing Corpus Christi processions as corporate events. They have catalogs with different faith packages, detailed quotes for custom spiritual experiences, and precise schedules to maximize the emotional impact on participants. Faith has become a product, tradition, a commodity, the sacred, a marketing strategy. And the most tragic thing is that millions of people participate in these processions, sincerely believing they are experiencing an authentic spiritual experience, unaware that they are being manipulated by commercial and political interests. Just as medieval believers were manipulated 700 years ago, the technique has evolved. The technology has become more sophisticated. But the essence remains the same, using popular religiosity to serve interests alien to genuine faith. And here's the bitterest irony of all. Jesus, whose presence is supposedly celebrated on Corpus Christi, was the one who drove the merchants out of the temple. He was the one who said you can't serve God and money at the same time. He was the one who preached that the last will be first and the first will be last. Everything that Corpus Christi represents today is exactly the opposite of the teachings of Christ. Ostentation versus simplicity, spectacle versus intimacy, mass manipulation versus personal dialogue with the divine, political interest versus a sincere pursuit of transcendence. But I'm not here to destroy anyone's faith. I'm here to give you the information you need to make your own informed decisions. If after learning all this history, you still want to participate in the Corpus Christi processions, that's your decision. But at least now you know what you're really celebrating. You know you participate in a tradition created to serve medieval political interests. You know you follow routes designed to humiliate conquered peoples. You know you finance, with your presence and your contributions, a commercial operation disguised as a religious event. And perhaps, just perhaps, this awareness will allow you to seek more authentic ways of living your spirituality. Ways that don't depend on historical manipulation, public spectacle, or collective validation. Forms that approach the simple Christ who instituted the Eucharist in a small cenacle, among friends, without ostentation, without politics, without hidden interests. But that's a choice only you can make. We've reached the end of this journey toward the hidden truth of Corpus Christi, and I want to leave you with some reflections that can forever change your relationship with religious traditions. The first reflection is this: if a tradition as central to Catholicism as Corpus Christi has such a different history than what we've been taught, how many other religious traditions also hide disturbing secrets? How many other practices we consider sacred arose from political, economic, or social interests unrelated to authentic spirituality? This doesn't mean we should discard all religious traditions. It means we should question, investigate, and understand them in their actual historical context before blindly adhering to them. The second reflection focuses on the power of the official narrative. For 700 years, billions of people believed in an idealized version of the origin of Corpus Christi because it was the only one available. The documents that revealed the truth were kept in secret archives, away from public access. One wonders, how many other historical truths that we accept without question are actually sanitized versions created to protect institutional interests? The third reflection concerns our individual responsibility. Now that you know the true history of Corpus Christi, you have a decision to make. You can continue participating in the processions as if nothing has changed, or you can use this knowledge to develop a more conscious and authentic relationship with your spirituality. I'm not telling you what decision to make. I'm telling you that you now have the necessary elements to make an informed decision. The fourth reflection concerns the future of religious traditions. If more and more people have access to this historical information, if more and more believers begin to question official narratives, how will religious institutions react? Will they continue to insist on romanticized versions? Or will they have the courage to acknowledge the dark aspects of their history? The answer to this question will determine whether religions can maintain their relevance in an increasingly informed and questioning world. And the final reflection is the most important of all: the difference between institutional religion and personal spirituality. Religious institutions may have their political interests, their historical manipulations, their hidden agendas, but this doesn't mean that the sincere search for the transcendent is invalid. Perhaps the real challenge is to develop a spirituality that doesn't depend on institutional traditions, that doesn't require collective validation, that doesn't rely on narratives created by others to serve interests other than one's own. A spirituality based on personal inquiry, individual reflection, constant questioning, openness to change and growth. A spirituality that honors the best of religious traditions without being fooled by their historical manipulations. This is perhaps the greatest gift you can receive from this revelation about Corpus Christi. The awareness that you don't have to accept ready-made spiritual truths. You can question, investigate, and consciously choose which elements of religious traditions make sense for your personal path and which are merely remnants of historical manipulations. And let me make one last invitation. If this video impacted you, if these revelations changed your perspective on religious traditions, please share this content with others who also deserve to know the truth. Leave a comment telling us how you felt when you discovered these historical secrets. Like it if you think more people need access to this information. And subscribe to the channel because I have many more shocking revelations about the hidden secrets of religious traditions. In the next video, I'll tell you the shocking truth about the origin of Christmas, and how this holiday you celebrate every year also hides a history of political manipulation that will leave you speechless. Until the next video, and remember, the truth can be disturbing, but it's always liberating. When you know the truth behind the traditions you've blindly followed, you become free to make conscious decisions about your spiritual life. And this freedom, this awareness, this ability to question and choose for oneself is the greatest gift any human being can receive. Thank you for having the courage to face these difficult truths. Thank you for not running away when reality turned out to be more complex than you imagined. And thank you for being part of this journey in search of the truth, even when it makes you uncomfortable, even when it shakes our deepest certainties. Because in the end, that's what makes us truly human. Our ability to question, to search, to grow, to transform when faced with new information. And Corpus Christi, regardless of its manipulative origins, teaches us at least one valuable lesson: that we should always be wary of traditions that demand our participation without question, that demand our faith without transparency, that promise salvation in exchange for blind obedience. True spirituality isn't afraid of questioning. It encourages it, because those who sincerely seek the divine don't need lies to sustain their faith. The truth is enough. The truth is liberating. And the truth is what you just discovered today. Until the next revelation.